Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and we're back for more Warhammer The Old World, and now looking at Warriors of Chaos faction focus heroes, having already done the first episode looking at the Lords, taking a look at the 8th edition Warriors of Chaos army book, seeing what units were in it and how they might play, to give us an idea of how they might play in Warhammer The Old World. While they might have slightly different special rules, their role is likely to be very much the same. So let's take a look at what we have for the heroes category. So, Warriors of Chaos heroes, here we're into the Exalted hero, and you can see here the current Exalted hero, bottom right hand corner, you've got an older version of an Exalted hero, also known as Crom the Conqueror. He was a named character at one point and then became just an Exalted hero. Here he is. I actually quite like the miniature. I think he looks really, really cool. He's really sort of flavoursome for an old miniature. But with the Age of Sigmar and going down these sort of monogod factions as well, you do have the options to take there's a Nurgle one who could be used as an Exalted hero. Here's one that could be used as a Slanesh Exalted hero. So, you know, there are other options if you want to make them look like the mark you might be giving them. Of course, that will restrict you later on if you did wish to switch the mark. So by going undivided in look means that you can switch marks freely, but you do lose a little bit of the flavour. You know, I do think both of these are actually quite nice looking for Exalted heroes. Stat-wise, they're basically a slightly toned-down Chaos Lord, an excellent stat line, weapon skill 7 instead of 8, but good weapon skill strength, initiative, attacks, and leadership, lacking in ballistic skill and wounds, which is only 2. Good selection of weapons. They got their hand weapon and chaos armor, but they can take their hand weapon, additional hand weapon, the great weapon, flail, halberd, lance if mounted in shield. They may take the chaos mark, exactly the same as the Lord, but only 50 points of magic items this time and 25 points of mutations. In terms of mount, they got pretty much the same as the Lords, with the exception of the Manticore and the Chaos Dragon. But they can still, if they have the right mark, take the mark-specific mounts as well. And they may also be the battle standard bearer, and that comes at the standard plus 25 points cost. Though from what we're seeing in Warhammer The Old World, being a battle standard bearer now might come for free, but be more limited on which unit can be a battle standard bearer. Special rules, it's the same Eye of the Gods table. So as I said in the previous video, Warriors of Chaos, they've got great stat lines across the board by and large. The flip side to that is they have a lot less special rules than we see in some factions like Elves and so on. We take a look like the Chaos Lord. It's a cheap hero, 110 points for that excellent stat line with plenty of options. You know, I did like to take an Exalted hero standard bearer in a unit of Chosen if I had the points, but it was very much dependent upon my Lord choices. So, for example, if I didn't take a Sorcerer Lord, then I would really want to have 2 hero level sorcerers in those slots. And it's quite easy to run out of points quickly in a Warriors of Chaos army because the stat lines are excellent, but even the base infantry are not cheap. So you do need to really think about overall, you know, what it is you want to run, how you want to run it, because I say you can run out of points quite quickly. So you do need to be careful with those Lord and Hero choices because you need to make sure you've got enough bodies on the tabletop. It's great having good stat lines, but sometimes you just need numbers of miniatures in a unit. So something to think about there. But that is the Exalted hero. Next up, we have the Chaos Sorcerer. You've got the one here, known as a Magister, if you go and look at that on the Warhammer store, but essentially is a Chaos Sorcerer. In fact, it's the one I use as my hero slot Chaos Sorcerer. I actually quite like the miniature. I think he's quite funky. He's got a bit of a Tzeentch feel to him, but, you know, could be anything. But is still available. Stats-wise, all stats, again, as the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. Unusually average across the board with good weapon skill and leadership. And I say unusually average because normally caster stats are pretty low. Equipment-wise, they've got that hand weapon and chaos armor. They've got the usual marks, magic items and mutations, level 1 or 2 wizard with the same laws of magic as that sorcerer lord. So being careful which mark you choose because it will limit what spells you can take. In terms of mounts, the same as the Exalted hero, so you're not taking the dragon or the manticore, and special rules back the same as the Eye of the Gods. So essentially a lower wizard level version of the Sorcerer Lord with the same wide choice of options. And as I said previously, if I'm not taking a Sorcerer Lord, then I would take 2 of these sorcerers. Or if I did take a Sorcerer Lord, then I'd prefer to take the Exalted Hero Battle Standard Bearer, so I'd have a level 4 Sorcerer Lord and then an Exalted Hero. As I said with the Exalted Hero, very easy to go overboard on points. Yes, I want a Chaos Lord, a Sorcerer Lord, an Exalted Hero, and a Sorcerer. Depends what flavour you're going for your army lists. Generally, I wouldn't go crazy heavy on the magic by having loads of wizards. I know some people did like that theme. They'd have a Sorcerer Lord and 2 sorcerers, still viable. And I think that's one of the things with the Warriors of Chaos book. It was actually you had a lot of choice that was still very viable in the meta, which I think is a sign of a good book. So continuing on now, mounts, Warriors of Chaos mounts. So I wanted to include this in the hero section because these mounts aren't covered later on in the book as individual entries. So you've got the Chaos Dragon, and as you can see there wasn't actually a Chaos Dragon mount. What you see here is actually a named Chaos Dragon. This is Galrauch as the Chaos Dragon. However, a good option for a conversion if you needed a Chaos Dragon to mount on. Either that, you were looking at other factions such as the High Elves or something like that for their dragon, or the Dark Elves, and having to convert it to make it a bit more chaosy. But you do have the option of using this very chaos Galrauch dragon here. Stats wise, as you'd expect, high movement, weapon skill, strength, toughness, attacks, a bit of a beat stick, low ballistic skill, not that matters, and initiative, which is the only downside. Special rules wise, they come with the Dark Fire of Chaos, which is a strength 4 flaming attack breath weapon. They can fly. They have Fumes of Contagion, so they do have a secondary breath weapon. This is included, it's not an option. So that's a strength 2 breath weapon, but with no armor saves this time. They're large targets and no cover. Scaly Skin 3+, which is pretty nice. That's a pretty decent save, and they do cause terror. So this is the only mount I would choose for my Chaos Lord if not going on foot. So, if I was really going to spend the points and splash out and put him on a big mount, the Chaos Dragon would be my choice. Though, as I said, that's quite expensive. But the ability to fly combined with 2 breath weapons, excellent stats that mean while expensive, the Lord on Dragon could pretty much wreck all but the toughest units. And if you ever got into the back line, then Archer's War Machines would just be swept away. And my armies basically started and based upon Undivided, and then having different marks of chaos. So I wasn't just going for an all Nurgle or all Siege. So I did tailor based upon that. So the next mount that we have here is the Disc of Tzeentch. You can see one here with a sorcerer on. So stats-wise, they've got average strength, toughness, attacks, leadership. They do have low movement, but they mitigate that with fly. But if you were grounded for any reason, you're only moving at 1. The weapon skill's poor, they don't have many wounds, and low initiative. Do have demonic attacks, fear, and they can fly. It's a cheap mount. It's only available to characters with Mark of Tzeentch, so most of the time this would be sorcerers. However, during 8th edition, most of the time I preferred to keep my characters embedded on units rather than on mounts, and that's pretty much standard across the board. You have the Juggernaut of Khorne. Now, I actually really love this miniature. Still available today. You can see it there on the round base that we see in Age of Sigmar. But for me, Khorne is one of my favourite factions. I do love Khorne. But I really love the look of the Juggernaut and the Lord on it. I think this miniature just really evokes like an absolute beat stick character on an absolute crazy mount. So I actually really love this miniature. I think it's really cool. Stats wise, good movement, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, attacks, and leadership, low ballistic skill and initiative as you expect for a monster. Comes with Brass Behemoth, which is a +2 save instead of 1 for being mounted. Demonic attacks as well, fear, and then murderous charge, giving you +1 strength on the charge. To be honest, it's not a bad choice for a mount, for a Khorne-themed army, and actually you have the option here of putting your Lord on a Juggernaut and then put him in a unit of Skull Crushers, and I actually do really like Skull Crushers as well for the added protection. So unlike a lot of mounts where you end up on your own and vulnerable by being on your own, the Juggernaut allows you to join that unit and be pretty well protected. Next up, we have the Manticore. Good movement, weapon skill, ballistic skill, a bit like basically a bit of a lower level dragon in a way. Cool looking mount, again, still available there. You can see it on the Age of Sigmar base. Can go with a sorcerer or lord on it. They may take Ironhard Skin, which will give you a 4+ armor save, and or Venom Tail, which is basically get an extra attack, which is poisoned with the multiple wounds 2. It is a separate attack and is rolled to hit separately, and you get +1 to hit if the target is in the rear arc. Comes with Fly, which is always useful for monsters. Killing Blow, which is very good. That's obviously just for the mount only. Large target, Terror. However, they do have the uncontrollable rule, which is at the start of a turn, take a leadership test, and if you fail it, it becomes subject to frenzy, which can have a downside effect as well as a plus. It's a decent monster. It's half the price of a dragon. However, if spending big, I prefer to go all out, as I said, and go and get the dragon. Which overall, it's just so much better than the Manticore in that the Manticore is good, but not as good as the dragon, where the dragon with a lord on could pretty much wreck units all virtually on its own. The Manticore not quite as good and does need the support there to make sure that you don't get attacked back and finished off. So if you're attacking, I'm talking about big, tough infantry units. So Manticore there. Not a bad choice, but certainly not my preference. Like I say, I'm either going on foot or I'm going all out and getting a dragon. Next up then, you've got the Demonic Mount. We saw this earlier in the Chaos Lord section. I say this is obviously a good option if you want to do Archaon as well, who has a Demonic Mount. Stats-wise, Demonic Mount's good movement, strength, toughness, wounds, and leadership, actually. Low ballistic skill, initiative, and attacks, however. All attacks are magical and does cause fear. As a monstrous beast, it can't join a unit of knights, and that is the big downside. So as with other characters on mounts, they're out on their own. They're just too vulnerable. This mount also cannot fly. It's toughness 5, it's 3 wounds, but that doesn't last very long when you're out on your own without any protection. So something to think about there. It as a monstrous beast, it's not joining that unit of knights, which is a shame. Whereas if you were on a Chaos Steed, you would be able to join a unit of knights. You've also got the Palanquin of Nurgle, so taking the Mark of Nurgle. This is actually the named character Epidemius. There's not actually a good Palanquin on its own or generic lord, but you can use Epidemius Palanquin and maybe with a bit of conversion of that as well, as you see here. A bit of an old model, but is still available. Medium wounds, attacks, leadership, low movement, weapon skill, strength, toughness, and initiative. Special rules, demonic attacks and fear. Now, again, it's a monstrous beast. It can't join a unit of infantry like Slan Palanquins, for example. So you're out on your own, your vulnerability. But on top of that, can't fly, but it's only got a movement of 4. It's toughness 3, 4 wounds. That isn't going to last long. So even though it has 6 attacks, and you're putting it in even with that 6 attacks, if I was running a Nurgle themed army, I still wouldn't consider taking this mount. I really don't like this mount, and if it was to be included in Warhammer The Old World and be viable, it definitely needs a bit of a shake up in terms of its rules somehow, certainly to improve the durability, which is what I'd expect for Nurgle, is to have more durability and be slower. In this case, it's not durable enough to be out on its own and slow. And then the final mount that we're going to be covering here is the Steed of Slaanesh. Now, again, there's no lord on a Steed of Slaanesh, but you can see those steeds there, part of a Hellstrider unit, so there's no reason why you couldn't convert a lord to be riding one of those if you want. Stats-wise, they have excellent movement at 10. They are very essentially fast cavalry and good leadership. Low everything else, though, and that is a downside to the mount, so you're really only using this mount for its mobility. It is not really boosting your attacks all that much. Special rules wise, armor piercing, that sounds great. Demonic attacks, magical, fast cavalry, fear and poison attacks. So, it's weak but highly mobile. Initially, with all those special rules, you think, wow, actually that should do some damage, until you realise that those special rules that apply only to the mount, armor piercing, demonic attacks and poison attacks, there's only one attack on the mount. So it's not really adding much to your lord. So maybe you could consider it if you're going in a Slaanesh themed army, maybe if you had a big unit of Hellstriders, which I particularly don't favour that unit, but in a Slaanesh themed army it fits. You could actually have him on a lord and he could join that unit. right? Because you just join the same unit of those Hellstriders. So definitely an option there if you were going down that Slaanesh focus, but as a generic sort of army as I ran it, which was multiple different marks and undivided as the base, not a mount that I would consider. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end of this video. Hope you've enjoyed it as we've had a look at the 2 hero options for the Warriors of Chaos and then all the mount options for those heroes and lords. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more content, hit that subscribe button. Totally free for you to do. And it's a big, big deal for me. So I really appreciate that. Thank you in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Hour. Tune back in as we start to look at the Warriors of Chaos core units.